Hello, my name is Nezumi, and in this video I'll show you how I made the AB.45 pistol from Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and this is specifically for the one with medium modification. To start, I made my own 3D model in Blender. This was my first 3D model ever. I really don't know what I was doing, so I'm not going to talk about how I made the actual 3D model itself, but I religiously watched Kamui Cosplay tutorial on how to make your own 3D model. Since I have no idea what I was doing, there was a lot of mess ups that happened and weird things that happened in the software that I didn't know how to fix, so you'll see I had to do a lot of stuff by hand. Anyway, I printed it in ABS filament, and these are the parts. I printed a left and right for the gun, about 8 pieces for the parts around the trigger, a counterweight, and 2 parts for the silencer, however I ended up not using those. Since I used ABS filament, I can take all the scraps from the support and put it into acetone. This will melt it down and turn it into a slushy, which you can use as a glue to permanently stick the 2 parts together. I completely covered one side, pressed the 2 sides firmly together, and then covered them in rubber bands and let it sit for a day. For the smaller parts around the trigger, I just glued those with super glue. After it was dry, I took my Dremel and started sanding down the seam lines. Like I said, this was my first model, so some things just didn't work right, so I sanded down a lot of the side panels to make them smoother and blend into the gun. And the counterweight also got the same treatment. And for the parts around the trigger, I lightly sanded it with a hand file. This part was super fragile and broke on me a few times, and that one part I had to use Warbler to fill in a gap. Then I sprayed everything with Rust-Oleum Sandable primer. After that, I used wood filler to fill in all the cracks and seams. What I don't show is that I also do lots of sanding, then priming again, and sanding and priming again until all the layer lines are gone. The bullet chamber didn't print right, so I had to carve that out myself with the Dremel and then use Apoxie sculpt to fill it in and sculpt it how I wanted it. I used Apoxie sculpt on some other parts as well to make sure I got the shape that I wanted. Once I was happy with it, I used half pearl beads and plastic washers to decorate it. And at this point, I could glue on the detail around the trigger. And I cut and glued on this little screw onto the counterweight. After one final layer of primer, I could start painting everything. The gun itself got a few coats of gunmetal silver, and the counterweight got spray painted red, and once that was dry, I masked off the line to airbrush it black. Then I could take off the masking tape and finish airbrushing on that ombre effect. For the wooden part on the handle of the gun, I masked off the shape. Then I gave it a base coat of warm brown first. While that was drying, I applied a gel matte medium to the parts around the trigger. And after that was dry, I stippled on a mixture of copper and green around parts on the trigger. Back to the handle, I took a mixture of different browns, and using a fan brush, I started to paint on a wood texture. Once dry, I could finally remove the tape. And here you can also see the parts around the trigger that I painted. Then I could glue on the counterweight. And off screen I did some more painting, like weathering around the whole gun. I also hand painted on the hand grip and serial number. I wanted to do these with water transfer paper, but both the paper and my printer kept messing up, so I ended up doing it by hand. And as I mentioned before, I didn't use the silencer that I 3D printed. So the larger part is made from a PVC pipe and craft foam, and the small part is a nail polish remover bottle cap. And those were painted with the same techniques you saw before. Then everything could get a few coats of a satin spray varnish, and then I could wrap the silencer in electrical tape. Finally, I could glue the silencer to the gun. And while that dries, here's how I made the fabric wrapping on the gun. I took some scrap red fabric and painted it with watered down acrylic paint. And while it was still wet, I took watered down blacks, browns, reds, and pinks and started painting on the design. Once it was dried, I cut it down into smaller strips and glued it onto the gun. And then I took a brown wax cord and tied it around the gun. And here's how the finished gun looked. And here's how I made the gun holster. I wrapped paper around the gun to figure out a pattern, and then I traced that onto craft foam. I did do some test fits to make sure it would fit comfortably with the gun inside. And I used smaller pieces of craft foam for decoration as well. I ended up using black 2mm craft foam and black pleather. I only used one layer of pleather, that way the inside of the holster was just foam. I wanted the gun to sit against the craft foam, that way it was softer and didn't rub against the gun. Next, I glued the pleather to the craft foam with contact cement. Just apply it to both pieces and then let it dry before sticking it together. Then I folded the edges of the pleather over the craft foam and sewed it down. However, I didn't sew the side seams down yet. And this is how that looked. I don't actually show the sewing process because I had to shove this through the sewing machine. And I also sewed on those decorative pieces which were made using the same technique. Then you can sew up that side seam, and I made a larger piece that sits on the thigh and I hand sewed the holster to that. There are straps that go around my thigh and also around my waist, and they just close with Velcro. The straps up top are fake, so I punched a hole through the pleather and then pushed the buckle through that. And using fabric glue, I could glue this part down so the buckle wouldn't come off. I also removed this little back piece of it off so that it would lay flatter. And here you can see it all glued down. Finally, I added some detail with some half pearl beads that I painted. And here's the finished holster. And here's what it looked like while I was wearing it. Thank you so much for watching, and please check out the other videos on how I made the costume. Please subscribe, like, and follow for more.